Happy New Year, Modern Mystic. Well, almost. The date of this podcast release is December 30th, 2019. So we have exactly 48 hours by my count or so to enjoy 2019 and get ready for 2020. It's a new decade, my friend, and I want to do what I can to set you up right, not just for the next year, but for the next 10 years, maybe even for the rest of your life. So I'm coming to you today with a message not of resolution, but of evolution. Welcome to the Modern Mystics Podcast. I'm your host, Alanna, the yoga doctor. I'm here to help you realize your potential as a spiritual leader and elevate your work in the realm of yoga, mysticism, and spirituality. This podcast covers all of our favorite topics: yoga, alchemy, astrology, divination, spirituality, psychology, ritual, and mystical practices, both ancient and modern. Get ready to uplevel your status as a modern mystic. So how do we do resolutions? We do it mystics style. And I know that it is such a big deal to write out your resolutions or figure out what you want the next year to be. And I think it's just so funny how we try to pack this all into the end of the year. Like suddenly, for some reason, on January 1st, something magical occurs and we actually have a new chance to do things differently. The reality is we could do that any day of the week or any day of the year. It doesn't have to happen on January 1st. But I do, of course, recognize the psychological and, of course, the astrological impacts and influences that this time of year does have. So I do want to honor that. We, of course, have spoken the last couple of podcasts about astrology as well as about the winter solstice. And if you missed those last two podcasts, I highly recommend that you check them out. They're going to give you some great information for your mystical repertoire in order to use moving forward, because we still have another eclipse coming up on January 10th. It's a lunar eclipse. So check out those past podcasts for more information on that. So all that said, I do understand why this time of year brings up this need, this desire to refresh things. Psychologically speaking, we do have that winter solstice, the longest night moving towards darkness that just happened on December 21st. I'm getting way ahead of myself. And the solstice gives us a moment to pause, to give some insight, to take some time to relax and restore. Before the light starts to return, the days begin to get longer, and we do actually have to take stock of what we still have in the stores in order to get through the rest of the winter. We have to really plan carefully how we want to plant things in the coming spring. And those are old school ways of looking at it, but we still have to do that in this day and age in our own ways. So taking this time to decide what you want the next year to look like, I think is a really important thing to do. So I don't begrudge anybody that. However, what I do want to caution against is the suffering that often comes when resolutions are not met. So resolutions are pretty lame, honestly. They're simply expectations. Resolutions are expectations that we set upon ourselves for things that we don't already do. We expect ourselves to suddenly work out 5 days a week. We expect ourselves to suddenly do something differently in our relationship. We expect ourselves to make this particular change in our career. That's what resolutions are. These giant expectations, these weighty expectations we place on ourselves. So I want to share with you my favorite definition of expectations, which is that expectations are premeditated disappointments. I remember the first time I heard this many years ago, it just rang so true for me that anytime we have expectations of ourselves or of someone else, they are simply just disappointments waiting to happen. And to release ourselves from the pressure of expectations, to release ourselves from the potential pain of disappointments is actually really easy. We just don't set ourselves up for that. Why would we want to set ourselves up for disappointment? The Buddha has a pretty big teaching, which is that suffering is optional. And the Buddha was a smart guy. I mean, if he said suffering is optional, I'm not going to question him. I believe him. My own practice of 20 years at this point also reveals that suffering is optional. It's generally a state of mind or a state of perception. So rather than perceive or expect ourselves to be something other than what we are, I'm going to offer us an alternative. Instead of making resolutions, let's just forget about it, as they would say in The Sopranos, or here in New York City where I live, and instead just lay some simple groundwork for positive and natural change. Now, I'm all for, if you've got habits, patterns, belief systems, ways of being, if they no longer serve you and you're not into them anymore, I'm all for transforming those. But there's a way to do it so that you actually stick with those transformations. So let's pretend it's a resolution, like I want to get healthy. Well, there's nothing stopping you right now from being healthy except your resistance to it. I want to share a story with you. I was out to dinner with some friends once a while back, and one of the women who was at the dinner also has the same autoimmune disorder that I do, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's a thyroid and immune condition. So she and I were chatting about it, and I was telling her about some of the ways in which I manage my condition and have also put it into remission. And I mentioned to her that one of the biggest ways that I treat my condition and keep it in remission is through diet. I have to employ a very strict dairy-free and gluten-free diet. But it keeps my antibodies down at 0, and I am much happier and healthier for it. Now, she struggled with the same autoimmune disorder, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, for about as long as I have, and she was stunned to hear of my dietary changes. Now, she was interested to hear about my remission and the fact that I no longer have symptoms and that I'm not tired like I once was and that things are much easier for me and my life has taken on a new shine. She was very interested in that, but she had incredible resistance to changing her diet. She said to me, and I'm not kidding you, she actually said to me, I would rather take this pill every day of my life than go dairy and gluten-free. Now, this isn't some sort of public service announcement to go dairy and gluten-free. That's not what this is about. This is merely a story to illustrate for you and to you how resistant to change people can be. Even when it is incredibly good for them, even when it could set them free of suffering, the kinds of side effects that this woman was having as a result of this particular condition is, I mean, they affect every single day of her life. And yet she was more concerned about her ability to eat bread at the table and have a dessert that included some dairy in it than she was about actually finding a new level of health. That to me was one of the most incredible demonstrations of resistance that I think I've ever encountered. That there is such a simple solution for what is actually quite literally ailing her, and yet she's resistant to that solution because of that short-term pleasure, that short-term gain of having what she wants to eat. So I share this story, and again, it's not any kind of political or statement or anything around being gluten-free or dairy-free, but it is just to share with you the nature of resistance and how insidious it is within all of us, and how many of us will actually make excuses for ourselves to stay small. We'll make excuses for ourselves to remain compromised in some way without even trying an alternative solution, an alternative way of being, without even trying to change. So let's do this experiment before we get into resistance and how to overcome it, which in my mind is the real way to not just resolute or resolve your new year, but to evolve your new year. So here's a little practice. Let's take stock of this past year, this past 2019. for those of you that are listening to the podcast at this time. So let's take stock of the past year, and let's do it month by month if you can. So this would mean you grab a sheet of paper, or you can whip out a note on your computer or even on your smartphone, whatever most suits you, and write down each month, January through December. And every month, see if you can take your memory back into that month and think about what challenges arose every single month. What happened during, maybe March was nothing, right? Maybe you're like, I don't remember what happened in March. It seems so long ago. Maybe it was just the same every day. Maybe something big happened in May. And so you'll definitely have something to write down there. But do your best to fill this out. And I want you to look at this taking stock of 2019 paper you've written down and see, even with just a few moments applied to this exercise, how many challenges came up for you already this year. What things this year did you overcome that you could not have predicted would have been happening in 2018? What did you achieve? What did you accomplish? Or what did you let go of this year? What was unpredictable to you? What was beyond just the everyday doldrums of life? And as you take stock of 2019, as you start to see what it is that you have overcome, done, been challenged by, achieved, you're going to see how every month of this year, you continuously overcame challenges and rose to the occasion. Every single month. It didn't take a January 1st to do it. Every single month, when something challenged you, you said, okay, I'm going to just take this challenge on and I'm going to go for it. Now, I understand, of course, that in those times you may not have wanted to. You may have wanted to shy away from it. You may not have wanted to do the thing. You were upset that the challenge was even present in your life. I understand. However, you did it. You overcame. So in every instance of triumph and challenge, we are always provided with exactly what we need in order to move through it. This is a lesson of the Bhagavad Gita. We are always provided with what we need in order to move through whatever challenge is happening now. Most of the time, we're unconscious of that process. We get to what many spiritual seekers would call the dark night of the soul, a term coined by St. John of the Cross. And it's in that dark night of the soul that we have the most suffering because we don't want to be there. We don't see it for what it is. And it's in those moments when all hope is lost that we actually somehow find something within us to continue to move forward. So I want you to, for a moment, put your mind inside one of these times this last year that was stressful and worrisome for you. Whatever challenge it was, doesn't matter. Just for this example, pick one, put yourself back in that place, and remember at that time if the stress or the worry was really necessary. Did the stress or the worry help you overcome that challenge? Did the stress or the tension that you were placing on yourself at that time, was it beneficial to you? Looking back now upon all the stress and worry you put yourself through at that time, would you now say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I worried so much? My guess is no. We often worry or stress or place tension on ourselves unduly. We don't need to. We do it because we're not in the present moment. That's when stress occurs. We're not in the present moment. We're worried about the outcome of the future, so our mind is in the future. Or we're regretting or nervous about the decisions that we've made in the past, so our mind is in the past. Okay? Stress or worry does not occur in the present moment, just FYI. It happens when we're stuck in the future or the past. We also have stress and worry when we don't want things to change. Okay, that's resistance. And again, that's not a condition of the present moment. Resistance to change is what makes us say things like, in January, I'll start my diet. In January, I'll commit to losing the weight I need to. In January, I'll finally get healthy. In January, I'll do the work I need around my relationship. In January, I'll figure out my job situation. We put it off into the future where it's still incredibly stressful, and we are resisting the change. We're resisting doing those things now. Why wouldn't we do them now? There's resistance that's happening. So how do we overcome resistance? We have to get comfortable with change. The French author Rochefoucauld said, "The only thing constant in life is change." And I know that that's difficult for us to hear. Well, sometimes. There's times in our lives where we can't wait for something to change. But there are other times when things are going relatively well and we just want them to stay exactly the same. But they will never stay exactly the same. Change is the only constant in this entire universe. So what if we could allow for change to occur simply by letting go of our resistance? I'll say that again. What if we could allow for change to occur? The only constant in the universe. What if we could allow for change to occur simply by letting go of resistance? If we didn't resist change, it would be easy. If we didn't resist getting up early in the morning in order to work out, we would probably work out. If we didn't resist the looks of people, the assumptions of people when we show up at the gym, we would simply show up at the gym. If we didn't resist the idea of having to go out and look for a new job, we would probably quit our old one. We would be doing the things that we're pressuring ourselves, that we're expecting ourselves to do in January, if we simply let go of our resistance to doing those things anyway. So my wish for you, upon listening to this podcast, at the dawn of the new year, indeed the dawn of the new decade, is to make your only resolution for 2020 to let go of the resistance that prevents you from doing what you want to in the first place. Think of it like a kid who has to get new shoes. It just happens, right? They don't resist the new shoes. They're growing into them. It's a process of evolution. They're growing bigger, and so they need the next size up. And there's not this digging into the heels and the, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. And no, please let me keep my tight, ill-fitting, painful shoes. They just get new shoes. What if 2020 was like that for you? Rather than bringing the resistance with you so that the changes you desire to make are harder, and in fact, change is the only natural constant. You can change all day long if you drop the resistance to that change. It's like the snake that sheds its skin. We allow for that shedding of our old selves, the selves that didn't want to be healthy, the selves that just use the excuses to stay small. When the snake sheds its skin, we allow for change and evolution, and that is letting go of resistance. One way to know if you are letting go of resistance, it's not going to happen overnight, okay? It is a process. It is itself an evolution. To recognize resistance, to soften to it, to move through it, to try and explore the root of the resistance. Sometimes resistance comes up and we're not even sure why. So we have to explore the root of the resistance, but the process of shedding resistance, letting go of resistance, you'll know when that process is occurring and that you are doing it successfully when you stop using the word should. Should is at the heart of these damned resolutions. I should be more healthy. I should be more fit. I should have a better relationship. I should have a better career. I should. Look, we've all got to stop shoulding ourselves. It's not helping us. And in fact, it's keeping us more mired, not only in resistance, but truly in suffering. So I implore you to be okay with who you are right now. Who you are right now is awesomely okay. No resolutions needed. And if you are awesomely okay with who you are right now in this moment, then you are allowing for the natural change, the natural evolution, the natural next shoe size, if you will, of yourself in 2020. And it will be easy for you to step into those new shoes. It will be easy for you to evolve and grow in the best ways for you to maximize your fullest potential as long as you let go of resistance. This process allows us to be nicer, happier people with less complications. Doesn't that sound nice for 2020? Wouldn't that make for a brilliant and happy new year? So with that, I hope that you have learned a little bit in this podcast about what a resolution is and why it's maybe not the best choice for the mystic, but rather the importance of remaining in the present moment, accepting who you are now, and letting go of resistance, allowing yourself to become the fullest, most maximized potential of who you really were always meant to be, because that's there, that's in you. You've got this. All right, so I look forward to an amazing 2020, and I would love to hear what kind of resistances you are dropping in the new year. If you want to give me an example, join me in the highereducation.yoga membership by accessing your $1 trial at highereducation.yoga/trial. And you can share with us there what you are dropping, letting go of, as a part of your New Year's 2020 commitments as opposed to resolutions. I'd love to hear that. And if you've enjoyed this podcast and the ones that I've released before, I'd love to hear a review. And you can review me on any of the sites that you've used to listen to this podcast. Not only do I love and appreciate that, it is also super helpful in having others find this podcast so that more people can listen. Have a wonderful, happy, safe, harmonious, and deeply connected new year, and I'll talk to you in 2020.